My name's Dale Harris. We have a farm just north of Gingin in a locality called Beermulla. We operate 280 hectares plus lease about another 200. So it's not a very big enterprise. We're focused on just doing one enterprise well, which is sheep production. We have a commercial sheep breeding operation for prime lambs, as well as a stud operation for producing fine cross rams as well, which we started a couple of years ago called Redbank FX Rams. Yeah, we're generally around that sort of 550 rainfall, and our sheep base is predominantly crossbreds, and then, moving to more finer genetics in that crossbred composite space. Always been quite interested in data, so we've always used ASBVs, and, we've been moving from a typical sort of first cross terminal operation to a self-replacing maternal composite operation. So, the ASBVs and selecting rams was on the data was really important. This project, though, sort of put a bit more emphasis on the reproductive rate. So taking a little bit more interest in, back a few years ago, the number of lambs weaned ASBV, and then into its component traits over the last few years, and really just trying to understand how that impacts where we are and in terms of our seasonality, and also what we're trying to achieve in terms of conception rate and ewe rearing ability, probably more so than litter size. So optimising reproduction rate, we've used flushing with lupins. So where we are north of Perth, it is pretty dry from November, December, right through till April, May. We join pretty early based on that seasonality. So we're trying to get all the lambs up to weight by October, November each year. So we lamb in late May and June. So we generally are lambing sort of slightly outside that ideal seasonality window. So flushing with lupins, teasing for 2 weeks prior to joining with vasectomised rams. And that's something that we've done probably more so in the last few years than historically. And so that's, been able to get us some pretty good reproductive rates, keeping ewes in pretty high condition score at joining, trying to maintain weight over joining, and then they do go backwards a little bit over the autumn before we scan. But then when we're scanning, we're splitting into singles and multiples, singles, triplets and twins and triplets. So we separate our triplets now as well. Condition scoring generally at scanning, and then splitting off anything that does need a bit of extra condition, especially in the twins and triplets. The singles generally get run pretty hard based on the amount of land we've got available, the number of paddocks we've got available. They generally get the rough end of the stick, but doesn't really seem to affect their survival rate. So we do have a target of 90% lamb survival. We've been getting very, very close to that. So 85, 88, 89 sort of in the last few years. So that's been pretty encouraging. And we could probably do with a little bit more shelter where we are. We don't have a lot of trees on the property in certain paddocks, so that's something that we're working on at the moment. And fox predation, we feel, is a big factor. So we've done a lot in the last couple of years on making sure we're baiting and shooting prior to lambing, and also doing a clean up in spring when young foxes are on the move. I know many sort of ag departments don't think foxes predate live lambs, but it's amazing to see when you can get some good fox control how much better lamb survival you do have. Conception rates historically, we used to lamb a little bit earlier. So we used to lamb in April. So we've actually moved that back because of the drier climate that we've been seeing over the last 10 years, and just a desire to want to lamb on green grass instead of dirt, which I think is good for everyone, including the farmer, to be honest. That's probably made them a little bit less seasonal as well. But the conception rates now, historically were around that sort of 90% mark, sort of around 10% dry. And we've moved that with teasers and flushing and just a bit higher condition score going into joining, sort of more up to that sort of 95 to 98% conception. Does vary a little bit from year to year. We've had some really, really hot summers, which has impacted conception rate. So ram performance and ewe cycling in really high temperatures. We've combated that with increasing ram percent in our commercial ewes, and we think that's made a difference. But even in the really hot summer we've just had, when we were single side joining in our stud operation, we still got very, very high conception rates. So it was interesting undertaking this year. So that's conception rate. In terms of scanning rate, we've reduced our joining to 5 weeks from 7 weeks by doing the teasing, but we've actually increased conception rate and reduced dries at the same time. I think it's that condition score going into joining has been probably the main driver of that. And we've seen scanning historically of 125, 130% move up into that 150 sort of percent, and even with some mobs up to 165% scanning. So that's something that we're pretty proud of. We've had to put a bit of feed into those ewes prior to joining to make that happen. But the benefits are well in front of the costs. We use a lot of silage now, and I think that higher quality feed, compared to hay, has definitely improved that scanning percent as well. So we used the same ram supplier, and then what we did was, we looked at the rams that we had available. We looked at what we were purchasing prior to this program, this project, and we did have a significant difference in the number of lambs weaned. I think it still was in the first year we did it, but then into the component traits for weaning rate in subsequent years. So there was a significant difference in that reproduction rate. And interestingly, the ram supply that we do use does generally have pretty high Ewe Rearing Ability, and even some of the rams that were a bit lower in reproductive rate still had some reasonable levels of Ewe Rearing Ability. The overall the difference was reasonably significant. And WA weaning rate ASBVs from WA ram breeders, I think, are a bit less than the eastern states due to the seasonality and the conditions that we have over here. But we looked at, the average was around about, I think it was 0.1 or 10% for the low group, and sort of 18%, 0.18 for the upper group, the higher reproductive rate group in the number of lambs, the older number of lambs weaned ASBV. The first year of the project, we were using a line of bought-in merino composite crossbred hoggets, and unfortunately, the conception rate was a bit average, to be honest, that first year. So it was a bit hard to see real differences. There was a slight difference in scanning percentage on the higher, or the demo team, the higher reproductive rams group. And I guess that showed a bit better in the second joining, where we had a bit better conditions. So that first year we only scanned that sort of 110 to 120 sort of range, whereas this as hoggets, and then as second lambers, we were 156 and 164%. So again, with the higher repro team, being a little bit better. I guess the main difference in that was the dry percent. So there was a very, very low dry percent in the higher reproductive rams than the lower group, or the group the traditional group we had. So that was probably the main differences. And then what we also did was we were able to track some of those progeny right through to join as ewe lambs, and then as hoggets. And ewe lamb joining that first year was a little bit average for those groups, but again we saw about an 11% difference in scanning rate to ewe lambs joined, again with the progeny that came from the higher reproductive ram group. And then that sort of balanced out a little bit at the as joined as hoggets, where it was about a 3% difference in scanning rate, with the higher group slightly ahead again. I think in terms of the project, it's highlighted to us probably what we already expected, that if we use higher reproductive rate ASBVs in our selected rams, we should see higher reproductive performance. So it was good to see the theory play out in practice. I guess that was really encouraging. I guess in our ram breeding business, in our Redbank FX rams breeding business, reproduction is important, but it's probably not the most critical component, where we're focusing heavily on conformation and then wool type and then the carcass traits. Probably, repro is still important as a the third leg of the wheel. We've got wool, carcass, and reproduction are the three legs of the stool. So it is important. So we are taking notice of it. And I think, the project, as I said earlier, has just highlighted that when you do select and you do focus on a particular trait, it'll work and it'll move in the direction you want it to. So again, in ram breeding or even in commercial production, it's just you get the results that you're focused on at the time. So keeping reproduction as part of the mix is important, and just balancing that with the other key traits that we're working on should see us move reproduction in the right direction, which will be positive. I think it's good just to really put the spotlight on what you're doing and really looking at your data. So it's sometimes, we collect a lot of data points through the business, and being an ag science graduate, I love the data, always have. So, but it just sort of allows you to take a bit of time out, really analyse that data a bit more intensively than probably what you would have done, right down to sort of the ram by ram level, and just seeing what results that you get out of that. And I think whenever you do a project like this, you do just get a bit more granular, you get a little bit more in depth in the data, and you can generally find some insights that you might have missed or you might have glossed over, or you thought might have been, there's probably a little bit of something in that. And then when you really look at the data and crunch the numbers, you go, that was a definite result there, whether that's good or bad, but it's a result that you can then use to make decisions going forward. I don't think it raised new questions. I think, as I said earlier, it highlighted, the theory around ASBVs and selecting on high reproductive performance will get you a higher reproductive rate, right? So that makes sense. And as I said, that's great to see it come into reality. And then it gives you just that little bit of extra confidence to say, okay, if I still want to keep pushing down reproductive rate, then I can probably take it to another level if I wanted to, because I've got that data now. We genomically test a lot of our lambs and especially all of our retained ewe lambs and ram lambs that we keep in the business. So again, having that data and then allowing us to make decisions around, if we want to push the needle on reproductive rate, we know we can, and we know sort of roughly what that quantum looks like on our enterprise with our sheep base. We sort of know how hard we can push that, in one or two generations now, which gives us confidence to make those decisions.